in the ancient world, there was always a sacred water source associated with a holy place, and the Garden of Eden has all of those kind of elements. So this is one sign among others you begin to see that indicate to you that what you're reading here are the details of a temple.
Mm.
And you see that as you study it more and more. And but that spring that comes up from the earth, I think it's connected to the Gihon spring.
Hmm.
And then it says, and wandered the whole face of the ground. Okay. And then it says, but there went up a mist from the earth and wandered the whole face of the ground. Now, in verse 7, what you have is an excerpt from another Mosaic account. Because when the priests put this together, they utilized different writings from Moses. They had a primary narrative they were working with, but they added, in certain areas, they added detail from other Mosaic writings. And in verse 7, you have a statement that comes probably from a different Mosaic account. And verse 8, I'm sorry, it's verse 7 and 8, I think. Let me pull up. I was just drawing something on this. And let me see here. Yeah, once you understand how the priests piece together Genesis, it will help you immensely. I'm telling you, it'll help you immensely. A lot of people hold kind of an idea that Moses just wrote Genesis as it is right now. He just wrote it as that book, and we've preserved it up to now, and there it is, Genesis that Moses wrote, just right like that. And that's not how we got Genesis. And a lot of people don't understand that, and once you know how we got Genesis, it makes a whole lot of sense of a lot of different things. And it's real simple, really. Moses, when he was in the wilderness with the people wandering, he received many visions from Yahweh, and he wrote down a lot of stuff. And the priests preserved these scrolls over the centuries. But there came a time in the Babylonian captivity when they condensed it into an official record, basically. And what you have in Genesis is a prepared presentation of the portions of Mosaic writing that the priests feel we need to have. That's basically what you have in the Pentateuch. And so there's little excerpts in it that come from a different scroll of Moses. And once you start to realize that, and that the Levitical priests were involved in putting this together, then you can begin to understand a lot. And it also helps you as you're reading like the critical commentaries. They'll talk about how they can see patchwork involved in the narrative and stuff. And a lot of times they're not wrong, the sort of conclusions they draw from it are wrong, but they are identifying real phenomena in the text, that shows the priest putting this together, really. So that's something a lot of people don't really understand. And the more you study Genesis carefully, the more you see it. You can't help but see it. And we'll do videos that really bring that out and stuff in the
Okay.
future. Um,
Would
but
Genesis chapter 10 be an example of that? Just putting the table of nations before chapter 11? Is that kind of an example of the way that
yeah,
they would do some things? Okay.
yeah, that's a perfect example. See, the narrative originally flowed along, and the priests, however, for our purpose to inform us of things, they took the Table of Nations, which was also Mosaic material, but they inserted it right there. You see,
Interesting.
so
Yeah,
that's the phenomena you see in different places.
I see. Good to know.
And when we were talking about that before, I mentioned how I was trying to think of an example where the priest puts something in front of where you need it so that you can know what's going on. And there was an example that I knew that was real good, but I couldn't think of it. I thought of what that example is. And
Hmm.
it's in Genesis 6. The opening portion of Genesis 6 comes from a Mosaic scroll that was about the Nephilim. It was all about the Nephilim.
Hmm.
And the priest took just this small statement out of it and put it there so that we would know that part of the reason there was a flood was because of the Nephilim.
Hmm.
They're trying to tell us that that the flood is connected to the concept of wiping out Nephilim. And so that's an example. And now, what else was in that Mosaic scroll on Nephilim? That would be an amazing thing to read, you know.
Hmm.
But we don't have anything else from it. Let me look at Genesis 6 real quick.
And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said,
My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years.
That section right there, verses 1, 2, and 3, comes from a Mosaic scroll about the Nephilim, and this is the only excerpt we have today. This is the only fragment we have today from that scroll. And then in verse 4, this is a priestly note from a priest, probably who was involved in editing this together. And he says,
There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown.
this is a priest here in verse 4 adding his own commentary just after this excerpt from the Mosaic scroll. And the reason all of this is in front of the flood narrative is so that we can know that part of the reason for the flood was to destroy Nephilim. And then that's why when you look at the material they utilize from Moses concerning the flood, Moses doesn't bring up the Nephilim when he was describing the flood. And since they're not mentioned in that part, that's why they inserted this part to begin chapter 6. A lot of people complain about the meaning of chapter 6. They say, when you read a little later on the flood, there's no mention of Nephilim, just that mankind is wicked. And it's like, yeah, but that's why the priests inserted this additional information at the beginning of the chapter, so we would know. But yeah, understanding the priests putting together the Pentateuch is important.
I see. Would you be able to be better aware of this by studying some critical commentaries then?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. I mean, they, you know, you have to be ready for what you read, though, because they have a just a low view of inspiration and preservation, and it just comes out in how they what they think the author's thinking when he writes these different things. But as far as being able to um, basically dissect it into its different pieces and stuff, they make a lot of good comments along those lines.
Sure, 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 sure.
And some are better than others. Like Dillman is a more of a real believer who's a critical scholar. And then you have guys that are a little tougher, like Driver and Skinner. And, I read all of them, but I don't know. There's just ones that you can tell they have just a higher view of the text as they go about this. And Dillman is one of those.
I see.
So Dillman's commentary on Genesis is available on the Internet Archive, and and so is Skinner's and Driver's. All those guys, their commentaries are on the Internet Archive, and they do a good job of, critically analyzing the text that way.
Very good.
I mean, they'll say things all the time, though, especially Skinner and Driver. They'll say things all the time. You'll be like, no, I can't agree with that.
Sure.
Yeah. So you have to use discernment. You have to have a thick skin to read it. So
Sure. I would imagine that, hence why we're making all these videos, having an understanding of what is really specifically going on in this text and having the overarching plan and story going on and everything connecting the way they would, I would feel like someone that understands this really well could be able to look at Skinner and Driver and be like, no, of course that's not going to fit because that does not fit the narrative. Well, this, on the other hand, can fit and does
Mhm.
provide more insight on something. So I can understand someone who just does not understand Genesis particularly well, hence not recognizing the heavy Judaic influence in it, would probably read through that commentary and really not be able to discern what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that material is a little too much for most people. I don't just go around recommending it. But like for
Sure.
someone like you, like, yes, that's my source for a lot of what I say. These guys have brought a lot of things to my attention. So, and so other people should, read them and just to get a basic idea of what's going on with the text.
Sure.
It's a mosaic. It's pieced together from Mosaic scrolls, though. And who was behind it? Well, the priests. They're the ones that preserved the Word of God all those years, and they're the ones that would. I'd have to do a video on canonization, but they're the ones that really preserve the books and ultimately canonize the Jewish Old Testament. So, their canonization occurred in stages, and I don't know. It's a pretty deep subject. Dr. Ernest Martin has written a wonderful book on it, Restoring the Original Bible. And he goes over a lot of the details. And so, I don't know.
Oh, sounds good to me.
See, when you look at the text differently, though, that's an underlying bias that's going to affect how people hear what I'm saying, you know?
Of course.
Because if you understand that the text was pieced together from Mosaic material by the priests, and who occasionally make their own remarks and stuff, but you can see it. And, you know, if you're talking to somebody that understands that, then a lot of what I say will make more sense. But some of the things I'm saying, if I'm talking to someone that thinks Genesis just fell out of heaven the way it is, um, there's no way they could even see some of the things I'm trying to tell them.